If you remarried after losing your husband, you may have been told by a friend, a family member, or even just an assumption you made yourself that remarrying meant giving up any survivor benefits from your first husband forever. For many widows, that belief alone has quietly stopped them from remarrying at all, out of fear of losing something they were entitled to. Here's what I want you to know today. If you remarried at age 60 or later, that belief is very likely false. Your survivor benefits may still be protected, fully intact, even in your new marriage. This is one of the most misunderstood rules in the entire Social Security system. And I've heard from women who made major life decisions, sometimes even avoided remarrying someone they loved, based on information that simply wasn't accurate. So let's clear this up together, carefully and completely. If you're new here, welcome. This channel exists to walk through exactly these kinds of moments, the financial and practical questions that come after losing a spouse, including the ones that surface years later, long after the initial grief has softened. Today's topic is a little different from some of our other videos because it's not just for women who are freshly widowed. It's for any widow who has remarried, is considering remarriage, or has simply wondered quietly in the back of her mind whether she gave something up by choosing to love again. If that's you, I want you to hear this clearly. Choosing to remarry was never something you should have had to weigh against your financial security. And for many widows, the good news is you didn't have to. Let's start with the rule itself, because the timing detail here changes everything. If you remarry before age 60, Social Security generally considers your survivor benefits from your first husband ended based on that new marriage. This is the part most people have heard, and it's the reason so many widows believe remarriage always means losing everything. But here's the detail that gets left out of that conversation far too often. If you remarry at age 60 or later, or at age 50 or later if you are disabled, your survivor benefits based on your first husband's record are generally protected. Your new marriage does not cancel them. This means you can be legally remarried, building a new life and a new relationship, while still receiving a survivor benefit based on the marriage that came before it. Two separate parts of your life, both still standing. I want to say this plainly because I think it deserves to be said plainly. Your right to those benefits was earned through your first marriage. A new marriage entered into after 60 does not erase that history, and Social Security's own rules reflect that. I also want to mention the disability exception a little more clearly because it's easy to skip past. If you are disabled, this same protection applies starting at age 50 instead of 60. So if you remarried at 52 and you meet Social Security's definition of disabled, your survivor benefits from your first marriage may already be protected, even though you're younger than the standard age 60 threshold most people have heard about. You might wonder why this rule exists at all, with such a specific age cutoff. The reasoning behind it reflects an old, and in some ways outdated, assumption that younger widows remarrying were beginning an entirely new financial partnership, while widows remarrying later in life were less likely to be financially merging their lives in the same way. Whether or not you agree with that reasoning, understanding it helps explain why the age 60 cutoff exists and why it hasn't changed even as attitudes toward remarriage later in life have shifted significantly. Here's where the misunderstanding usually happens. Many people hear you lose survivor benefits if you remarry as an absolute blanket statement without ever hearing the age 60 exception attached to it. Word of mouth tends to simplify complicated rules, and in this case, that simplification has cost women real information about a choice that matters deeply to them. I've heard from widows who assumed this rule applied to them at 63, at 68, even at 71, simply because nobody ever mentioned that the rule changes entirely once you're past 60. If this is the first time you're hearing this clearly, please know you're not alone in that gap of information. I want to address this honestly too, because I know some women watching this remarried before turning 60 and are wondering what that means for them now. If your first husband passed away, you remarried before age 60, and that marriage later ended, whether through divorce or the passing of your second husband, your eligibility for survivor benefits based on your first husband's record may be restored. This is an important detail that often gets missed entirely. The loss of survivor benefits due to remarrying before 60 is not always permanent. If that later marriage ends, it's worth contacting Social Security directly to ask whether your original survivor benefit eligibility can be reinstated. I say this because I don't want anyone watching this to assume a decision made years ago has permanently closed every door. Circumstances change, and so do the rules that apply to your specific situation. Here's a detail that surprises almost everyone I explain this to. If you remarried after 60 and your second husband also has his own Social Security record, you may actually be eligible to choose between survivor benefits based on either marriage, whichever provides the higher amount. This means your financial history isn't limited to just your first marriage. If your second husband's work record would provide a higher survivor benefit down the line, either through his own passing or through spousal benefits while he's living, you may have more than one path available to you. This is exactly why I always encourage widows in this situation to have a direct conversation with Social Security about every marriage in their history, not just the most recent one, and not just the first one. Social Security can walk through your specific record and tell you which benefit from which marriage provides the strongest outcome for you. Please don't assume this is too complicated to sort out, or that you'll be seen as asking for too much. This is precisely the kind of detailed calculation Social Security representatives are equipped to walk through with you. You simply have to ask the full question, mentioning both marriages clearly. Here's a situation that adds another layer, and I want to address it because so many women write in asking about it. What if your first marriage ended in divorce rather than through his passing, and you later remarried? Generally, if a prior marriage lasted 10 years or longer, you may still have access to benefits based on that ex-husband's record under certain conditions, even without ever having been widowed by him. This is a completely separate set of rules from survivor benefits, called divorced spouse benefits, and it deserves its own full conversation, which we'll cover in a future video. But here's the connection to today's topic. If you were divorced from a first husband and later widowed by a second husband, the age 60 remarriage protection we've been discussing applies to that second marriage and his record as well. Your history doesn't have to be simple for these protections to apply. Social Security is equipped to sort through multiple marriages, multiple timelines, and multiple potential benefit sources, as long as you're willing to lay out the full picture for them. So how do you actually find out where you stand? Let's walk through the steps. Step 1. Call Social Security directly and explain your full marital history, your first marriage, when your husband passed, the age you remarried, and any other marriages since. Step 2. Ask specifically whether your survivor benefits from your first husband's record remain intact, given the age at which you remarried. Step 3. If you remarried before 60 and that marriage has since ended, ask whether your original survivor eligibility can be reinstated. Step 4. If you have a current living spouse with his own work record, ask Social Security to compare potential benefit amounts across both marriages so you understand which option would provide the strongest benefit if needed. Step 5. Request everything in writing, or at minimum, keep detailed notes of what you're told, including the date and the representative's name, since this involves several moving pieces of your personal history. Let's go through the mistakes I see most often around remarriage and survivor benefits. Mistake 1. Assuming that any remarriage at any age automatically cancels survivor benefits permanently. Mistake 2. Avoiding remarriage entirely out of a fear that turns out not to apply once you're past 60. Mistake 3. Not revisiting eligibility after a second marriage ends when reinstatement might actually be possible. Mistake 4. Not mentioning a second husband's work record when discussing benefits and missing a potentially higher benefit option as a result. Mistake 5. Relying on advice from friends or family members who mean well, but may be repeating an oversimplified version of a much more nuanced rule. Mistake 6. Not mentioning a divorce from an earlier marriage when discussing benefits, when that marriage might open up its own separate set of options worth exploring. Mistake 7. Feeling hesitant to bring this up with a new spouse, out of worry that discussing a first husband's benefits feels disrespectful to the new marriage. In reality, most spouses understand that this is about financial security built over a lifetime, not a reflection on the current relationship. Let me share a story that reflects what so many women experience. I'll call her Patricia, though her story mirrors countless others. Patricia lost her first husband in her late 50s. A few years later, at 62, she met a kind man through her church community, and they eventually married. For years, Patricia quietly assumed she had given up any connection to her first husband's Social Security record by remarrying. Nobody had told her otherwise, and she never thought to ask. She even mentioned once to a close friend that she'd made her peace with giving that up, treating it as simply the cost of choosing happiness again. It wasn't until a conversation with a friend who had gone through something similar that Patricia learned about the age 60 protection. Patricia described feeling a strange mix of relief and frustration all at once. Relief that the benefit was still hers, and frustration that she'd spent years believing otherwise, simply because nobody had ever explained the rule clearly. She called Social Security, explained her situation, and confirmed that her survivor benefits from her first husband had in fact remained available to her the entire time. She simply hadn't claimed them because she believed the door was closed. Within a few weeks, her benefit was reinstated, and she later told me it felt less like receiving money and more like receiving an apology the system could never quite say out loud. Patricia's story isn't about a mistake she made. It's about how a piece of information, simplified through years of word of mouth, quietly shaped a belief that wasn't entirely true, and how one phone call made years later corrected that. Here's your simple checklist for this week. Step 1. If you remarried at 60 or later, call Social Security and confirm directly that your survivor benefits from your first marriage remain intact. Step 2. If you remarried before 60 and that marriage has ended, ask specifically about reinstating your original survivor eligibility. Step 3. If you currently have a living spouse, ask Social Security to compare benefit amounts across both marriages. Step 4. Write down everything discussed and keep it somewhere safe for future reference. Step 5. If you know another widow who avoided remarriage out of this same fear, gently share this information with her too. It may change more than just her finances. Step 6. If you're currently unmarried but considering remarriage, and you're near age 60, it's worth understanding this rule before you decide, simply so the timing of your decision is fully informed either way. I hope today's video offered you something more than just financial clarity. I hope it offered a kind of quiet relief. The knowledge that choosing love again later in life was never something that should have cost you your financial security. For many widows, it doesn't have to. You deserve both a full life and the benefits you're entitled to. Neither one should have required giving up the other. Love at any age isn't something that should come with a hidden financial penalty, and for most widows who remarry after 60, it doesn't. If this video helped, I'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe. Every week, we walk through another piece of this journey together. And if you know a widow who remarried and has quietly wondered about this exact question, please consider sharing this with her. It might be information she's been carrying uncertainty about for years. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Take gentle care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.